Hello, all you lovely cosmonauts. Welcome to 2018, and what better way to start the new year with the best games from the old year? That's right, it is time for the top 10 games of 2017, according to me, Cosmic. So shall it be written, so shall it be done. At number 10, we have Resident Evil 7. Oh yes, Resident Evil 7, the game that single-handedly redeemed a franchise from the pits of despair. And that is what Resident Evil 7 did. It took a game and it took a franchise and lifted it from the dregs and made people remember why they loved that franchise in the first place. And it also, I suppose, Resident Evil itself, Resident Evil 7, found itself once again. We've had many Resident Evil games that have not been Resident Evil. The game sort of went from survival horror to some strange third-person action co-op game that nobody wanted, nobody asked for, and certainly the franchise and, its grassroots didn't deserve. And 7 has completely flipped that around now. We now have a survival horror game that's called Resident Evil again, which is strange to think about because who would have thought that Resident Evil wouldn't have been a survival horror game at some point in its early foundations. But there we have it, 5 and 6 were real things, and that was, a thing that happened and we should never speak of again. And, 7 has wiped over that now. We have a really good first person for the first time survival horror game that really was inspired out of things like Kojima's and Del Toro's PT. It was a really nice blend of survival horror with really atmospheric set pieces. What it did great was that it once again balanced that idea of survival horror, the fact that you are powerless but at the same time not as powerless, so you can get through, but sometimes your entire stomach is going to be in your throat while you get through. It's going to be tense, it's going to be nail biting, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I will however say that Resident Evil 7 did have its shortcomings. One, it was far too short for my liking. I felt that I was only halfway through the game when it suddenly ended, and that was a big disappointment. There was also the fact that later on in the game you do start to feel overpowered. With all these weapons and all these guns, it starts to become a lesson in how fast can I kill enemies versus, how can I run away from these enemies. And regardless, the tension throughout the game does try and do its best to retain that kind of survival horror experience, but you have to say that later on in the game it does kind of fall short of that. However, it is probably the best Resident Evil since 4. It was astounding, my expectations were low, and I was pleasantly surprised by the entire experience. It's certainly worth picking up if you haven't already done so, and I think that it is the foundation of great things to come for the Resident Evil franchise in the future if they keep it up and don't decide to do a massive detour like they did with 5 and 6. Number 9, For Honor. You all remember that game, right? For Honor, that everyone played for like 2 weeks and then was completely forgotten about after the fact, apart from the hardcore people who wanted to stick with it. Yeah, that game. So For Honor was a game released by Ubisoft earlier in the year that basically was a multiplayer third-person melee action game, and I absolutely loved it from start to finish. I played the beta, I played launch, I played after launch, and then, like everyone else, I stopped playing and never returned to it again, even after the content updates. And I recently went back to try it out to see how the game had progressed, and it's absolutely fantastic. It still remains a really fun game. Certainly has its shortcomings, certainly has its issues, balancing being one of them, but I have to say, as third-person melee multiplayer-focused experiences go, For Honor's a bloody good game. It really has no staying power. It really struggles to retain those players and retain your attention for an extended period of time. It is definitely one of those games where you play when you're all hyped up about it, and you play and you play and you play, and you can quickly burn yourself out on the gameplay. That said, however, it still, from a quality standpoint, was bloody good. It felt good. The controls were innovative and fun. They were very intuitive. They never felt difficult. Certainly difficult to master, but very easy to pick up. Then you also had the nice single-player campaign, which I will admit made no real sense, and the writing was a little bit iffy, but it was a cool world that they created. It was a really fun idea, and it certainly merits a second game and another shot at it. I loved the content that they added. I thought that the microtransactions could have been done better, but overall, in terms of a multiplayer experience where you get to swing kick-ass swords against each other, it was great fun. And some of the design ideas for the combat itself were really interesting, and I think that in terms of a basis of a franchise, it's a solid start, and I'm really hoping to see another For Honor. And I think that it was such a quality game and so fun, and just had real big charm about it. It wasn't a disaster by any stretch of the imagination. For Honor's biggest disaster is the fact that it just wasn't entertaining enough to keep playing over a long term. But aside from that, while people were in it, it was a lot of fun, and I think that is why I put it at my number 9. Number 8, Styx Shards of Darkness. Styx Shards of Darkness, for those of you who don't know, is a fantasy-based stealth game that is the follow-up to Styx Master of Shadows, which is the, I suppose, prequel to an RPG called Of Orcs and Men. And it centers around Styx, a little goblin character who can talk, and he goes around being all stealthily like to complete various objectives. It is a story-driven game that is a hell of a lot of fun, and I absolutely love it from start to finish. It is from Focus Home Interactive. It has, I would say, been middle of the road for a long time in terms of Focus's games. They have all been middleware and can be really good or really bad depending on your particular preferences. But Styx Shards of Darkness really represented to me quite a large step up in terms of quality for Spiders, the developers, and the publisher. It was a marked improvement in almost every aspect over the original, which is something I really like to see in a sequel. I don't want to see more of the same. I want to see what you've done before done better, and Styx Shards of Darkness really does. It had tons of content, big open maps, and it was probably one of the only pure stealth games we've seen this year. It was a pure stealth game done correctly. So many times we have, suboptimal stealth games whereby you can do this or you can do that, or you can, if you want to run and shoot through everybody throughout the level, you can in most stealth games. In Styx, you cannot do that. It is a stealth game. So if you do not like stealth, if you do not like waiting around and learning enemy movements, using items correctly, timing traps, then this isn't going to be for you. But for those of us who actually enjoy stealth games and not just the idea of stealth games, Styx is perfect. It really does encapsulate what stealth games should be about. They should be about all of the things that you should be doing to be stealthy and not what you think you should be doing to be stealthy. There's so many options, so many progression. The characters, the story, the voice acting, the art design is all wonderful, and it solidly deserves its spot in my top 10. Number 7, Lawbreakers. Lawbreakers could fall into so many categories at the end of 2017, including most disappointing. It could be that game that was 3 years late. There's so many that it could fall in. Certainly, though, it deserves its spot in my top 10. Lawbreakers is very similar to the likes of Battleborn, Overwatch, and the numerous hero-based first-person shooters. I say it's similar in, I would say, appearance alone, in terms of if you looked at it and didn't delve anything beyond the surface, then, it's similar. That said, in terms of first-person shooter mechanics, it's an absolute dream. I absolutely love Lawbreakers. It's a shame that it just came at a time when everyone is on the back end of Overwatch. Everyone's kind of sick of, seemingly hero-based shooters. That isn't quite the case with Lawbreakers. It's not quite a hero-based shooter. It is a shooter with heroes in it. Each hero is unique, but at the same time can do multiple jobs, whereas in Overwatch you have very specific hero-based abilities, and you don't have that in Lawbreakers. Lawbreakers is a lot more faster, it's a lot more fluid, it's a lot more in line with, you know, traditional FPSs like Quake. And it's just fantastic. It's fluid, it's fun. They have serious issues with the new player experience. You know, there's so many people who, you know, when Lawbreakers launched, just didn't know how to play properly. And that's not their fault. It was the game's fault because it didn't tell you how to play properly. The zero-based gravity areas, which were absolutely tons of fun, especially in a first-person shooter, people didn't know how to navigate those efficiently and correctly, which really hampered, I would say, everybody's experience, because you have enemies who don't know how to shoot at you and don't know how to move correctly, and then you have teammates who don't know how to shoot at the enemy and move correctly. And so it really did hamper the experience, which was their own fault. However, that said, it is probably the best first-person shooter of the year. It was fantastic. It was the best multiplayer first-person shooter of the year, hands down. Technically, in terms of controls, they were, you know, intuitive. As once you've learned them, they were especially intuitive. But it was just a case of the new player experience was not good, and frankly, they were a bit late to the game in terms of the whole hype over multiplayer first-person shooters. And it's a sad thing because it's definitely, in terms of quality, probably one of the best ones, if not the best one, on par definitely with the other big dogs in the house. So it certainly deserves its spot at my number 7, and it's a shame that it's pretty much dead. Number 6, Cuphead. Yes, the obligatory Cuphead inclusion in everybody's top 10 games of the year this year, and Cuphead deserves it. Its art style alone is absolutely breathtaking. It's a lot of fun. While personally I wasn't overwhelmed by the gameplay, it is not my style of game at all. I can appreciate it from an objective standpoint that it was executed very well. It was everything that they said it was going to be, and I have to admit, it provided some really cool boss battles. While the platform shooter kind of aesthetic and gameplay isn't really my thing, I have to say that even people who don't like the genre, like myself, you can't not look at Cuphead and go, well, that is just an impressive game in and of its own right, and certainly deserves all the acclaim, all the praise, and all the success that the developers have earned this year. Number 5, Tales of Berseria. The Tales series of games is a series that I hold in very high esteem and love it as such other games such as Final Fantasy. However, the Tales series has, similar to Final Fantasy, been an up and down roller coaster in that it has provided some absolutely exceptional games and then some dismal ones to boot. After the sensational Tales of Vesperia, Tales really as a series struggled to gain any traction after that point, putting out pretty much disappointment after disappointment. And Tales of Berseria came along and I thought, it's another Tales game. They're not going to match Vesperia in terms of its quality and story. And that put my expectation level really, really low and almost was disinterested when the actual release of Berseria came along. Lo and behold, Berseria comes along, I try it, pretty much apathetically, and it was fantastic from start to finish. It was one of my favourite RPGs of the year. It is probably the best Tales of games since Vesperia, but I think in terms of a grand scale of ranking, I certainly think that Berseria is not quite as good as Vesperia was, but it is certainly a good second in that ranking, and I absolutely loved it. It had a really good variety of characters, very interesting storyline, some great voice work, and there was everything in there that you've come to expect from a Tales game. It was just a really fun JRPG that just really hit home. It touched on that nostalgia from past JRPGs, but also kept things interesting and in line with the rest of the Tales series. A well done overall. Number 4, XCOM 2 War of the Chosen. While technically not a game in and of itself, it is an expansion to a game. XCOM 2 War of the Chosen basically adds another game to an already existing game, being XCOM 2. Now, those of you who've watched my videos before know that I am a massive fan of XCOM and the XCOM franchise, dating way back before 2K Games started pushing them out. And XCOM 2 was a great game. The unofficial expansion, Long War, which was from the modding community, was a great addition. And it was something that really helped people like me who always want more XCOM stay around for the long term. XCOM 2 War of the Chosen was clearly inspired by the Long War mod that came about from the community, and it adds story, it adds new tactical gameplay, it adds new classes, new items, new missions, a whole host of mechanics and additions that just made the game pretty much better in every single way. There were very few things about War of the Chosen that I did not like. I absolutely loved the idea, the inspiration from clearly of the Nemesis system from Shadow of Mordor, with the Chosen. If they beat you, then they gain power-ups, and they gain power-ups over time, and if you destroy them, then things happen, actions have consequences, etc, etc. It was just an outright wonderful tactical RPG experience that I could not put down for the longest time. I like to call it XCOM mania. Every time a new XCOM game comes out, or a really cool mod, I get XCOM mania and put far too many hours into that game. Well deserved, really well executed, similar to like how I like my sequels in terms of making sure that you take what you already have and then improve it. XCOM 2 War of the Chosen did that, but then added to it, right? And that was just fantastic. It was a great addition to the game. Had the content, and in terms of longevity and length of that content, it was worthy of a standalone by itself. A top-notch addition, and loved it every single minute. Number 3, Total War Warhammer 2. Without a doubt, Total War Warhammer as a franchise is single-handedly the greatest thing that has come up from a mashup of companies in the last decade. It is the best thing for Warhammer fans, it is the best thing for Total War fans. Put it together, it is the best thing for everybody, and I absolutely loved it from start to finish. The sequel to the critically acclaimed first game basically takes everything that the first game did, certainly improves on some aspects. You've changed the setting for the main campaign, changed the races, new additions, new mechanics, very interesting new mechanics as well, especially with the right system and, having certain, in-battle abilities that activate under certain conditions. And it just added to what made Total War Warhammer great in the first place. The biggest improvement over the original was the campaign gameplay, because ultimately, in terms of the combat, you already have that nailed down. That is a refined Total War experience over decades that has been refined and replaced with giant monsters, and it's a lot of fun. But that campaign gameplay was a bit tiresome and lethargic in the first game, and that really has been livened up in the second game. Then, of course, came Mortal Empires, which has been technically a bit of a disappointment. However, it has tons of potential in terms of adding, the first and the second game together to create a massive, giant campaign map, having all the races in one battle royale for the old world. And it's just a great game. For those of you who like Total War games, for those of you who like grand strategy games, and everything in between, it is a top-notch experience, AAA experience that, frankly, while each and every single one of Creative Assembly's games does have its downfalls and flaws and balancing issues and the array of things that come with making a giant game, they're always high quality. They're never not high quality. They're never buggy to the point of no return. If there is a bug through patching, they always get rid of it quickly, and overall it is just a wonderful experience from start to finish. Number 2, Divinity Original Sin 2. And here we go. This actually was a top spot for a lot of outlets this year. Divinity Original Sin 2, the sequel to Divinity Original Sin by Larian Studios, once again proved that turn-based RPGs ain't going nowhere. And I absolutely loved it. It was, just fantastic. Every element of that game was wonderful. The depth, the quality, the quests, the characters, the first time we're going to have fully voiced characters in there. We've got origin stories in there. You've got customizable characters. You have multiple paths through every level. You have multiple quests. You have things changing. You have, multiple perspectives. The co-op, the multiplayer. Everything about that game is just so rich, so tactically deep. There's so much fun to be had in Divinity Original Sin 2. The replayability alone is mind-boggling, and it's just an experience to experience, and that's all you can say about it. It's just one of those things that you sit down and play, and 80 hours later you think, holy crap, that was amazing, let's do it all over again. And hats off to Larian for that. It's very difficult to create an RPG like this. It's very difficult with multiple quest lines, multiple paths, multiple things that the character can do. You can kill quest givers, which means you have to have, a quest giver that gives quest without having the quest giver alive, so you have to find another way to do that, and it's, it is mind-bogglingly difficult and complex to do that, and yet Larian seemed to do it with ease. And sure, there are problems with Divinity Original Sin every time it comes round, with bugs and quest issues, but they patched those out really efficiently and quickly, and it's just one of the best top-down RPG experiences to be had to date since the conception of video games. For me, Divinity Original Sin 2, I loved the first one, don't get me wrong, but this just far surpasses it. This, to me, is on the level of top all-time great top-down RPGs by far. It is one of the best RPG experiences to be had on PC right now, and I certainly recommend it. Well worth a number 2 spot. And last, but by no means least, here is the top game of 2017 as dictated by Cosmic. It is, of course, my number 1, Prey. What can I say about Prey that hasn't already been said? It's tense, it's atmospheric, it's fantastic, all of which has already been said, so I'm pretty much repeating everything that's already been said about it. Prey came at a time where I pretty much wanted to hate the game. Pretty much was going into this game thinking Arcane and Bethesda have got together to ruin a really great IP. And while Prey, this version, the reboot, has pretty much nothing really to do with the original in any kind of meaningful way or any kind of direct sequel kind of way, I have to say that, it's phenomenal. Like, ever since I watched that first trailer of Prey with Morgan New, I thought, oh my gosh, what is this? This is going to be awful. They're ruining Prey. What are they doing? And the final product was something that just left me, certainly, with my jaw to the floor, similar to what BioShock did the first time round. And I have to say that the System Shock influences and the BioShock influences, etc., were just something that I could not get enough of. I absolutely loved Prey from start to finish. It was something that I never, I started playing that game when I got it, and I did not put it down for about 3 days. The replayability aspect was fantastic. The multiple endings was great. All of the progression and abilities, and most importantly, the story, right? The cast of characters, the story, the intrigue was really, really good. There was very few things about Prey that I didn't like, to the point where I would say, oh, that is an issue, right? Like, the minor things were so minor that I just could ignore them completely. And any time that it was kind of a major issue came up, it was always just pushed away by the fact that, hey, we have this amazing game that's really high quality, with a great story, with some great gameplay, with some great progression. Just love me, right? Just love me. And I absolutely did, all the way. It was the biggest surprise to me of the year. Hands down, for me, the best narrative, at least one of the best narrative experiences of the year. I thought that the execution of the story, the voice acting, the audio, the creation of the atmosphere, the creation of tense, the enemies, the environments, the level design, just everything just hit on the mark every single time, and it was just wonderful. I have to say that it is one of the few games that I would recommend to pretty much any gamer, right? So there's games that I would recommend to people who like certain things, but Prey is just one of those games that I would recommend to pretty much anybody, because it's that great of an experience from a narrative and a gameplay perspective. It's just fantastic. It certainly deserves number 1 for this year. I absolutely loved it, and I really hope that the next 3 Prey games are as good as that one. Especially with that ending, I would certainly like to know what they're going to do next, if they do anything at all. But fair play to Bethesda, fair play to Arcane Studios in particularly, and fair play to Arcane and Bethesda fair play to Arcane, right, for making this amazing. It's a touch of brilliance, this game. It's a touch of brilliance. The influences from System Shock and Bioshock and all those games that came before it, and the additions to it, and the twists on the story, and the overall narrative experience, it's a touch of brilliance, right? Shame on Bethesda for not putting enough marketing power, or they put so little marketing power behind this game. From a PR perspective and from a journalist perspective, they put so little marketing power behind this game that it made me feel like that Bethesda themselves were pretty much like everybody else, looking from the outside, thinking, oh, this isn't going to work, the changes to the IP aren't going to work, people aren't going to like it. Bethesda as a publisher seemed to have so little confidence in Prey, and yet, Arcane knew all along. Arcane, had a vision, a very clear vision, and they executed that with impunity, and it was top notch. So well done to Arcane for creating an absolute masterpiece. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my number 1 game of 2017, and that is my top 10 games of 2017. So thank you so much for watching and listening. Let me know what your top games of the year were in the comments section below. If you liked the video, please hit the like button, make sure to subscribe, and most importantly, share the video around to help the channel out. I have been Cosmic, you have been my lovely audience, and I will see you next time.